Welcome back to Nusantara Explained, the podcast that helps you understand Indonesia better. I'm your host Zaki. In today's episode, we'll be discussing the origins of the term Indonesia, the Indonesian national awakening, and the concept of Wawasan Nusantara. So better start making yourself comfortable because this is going to be quite the ride. Indonesia is a country with a diverse set of people, languages, and cultures, spread over 18,000 islands, more than 300 ethnic groups, speaking more than 700 living languages, various native kingdoms, tribes, sultanates, along with Chinese Kongsi republics, and the European trade companies and colonies ruled over the vast archipelago. People living in the coast, the plains, the highlands, the river dwellers, Muslims, Christians, Hindus, Buddhists, Confucians thrive alongside traditional faiths and ancestor worshippers. In the pursuit of profits and power, all this diversity is put under one colonial authority by the Dutch. However, despite these differences, the people of Indonesia share a strong sense of national identity. With the implementation of the ethical policy, the Dutch helped create an educated class of indigenous scholarly elite. The changes brought by European education for the elite were profound. It also formed a sense of a unified identity among those previously diverse groups of people. This sense of identity were the islanders from Java, Sumatra, Borneo, Sulawesi, the Moluccas, New Guinea, and all the islands in between begin to see themselves as one people, Indonesians. This identity, which will later be further developed as the Wawasan Nusantara idea, is deeply rooted in the country's history, particularly in the Indonesian national awakening. The term Indonesia itself was popularized by a British scholar named James Richardson Logan in the 1850s. At the time, the archipelago was known by various names such as the Dutch East Indies, the Malay Archipelago, Indi, the East, and the Spice Islands. Indonesia was deemed a term that would be more inclusive of the diverse peoples and cultures of the region. The term Indonesia derived from the Greek words Indos, meaning India, and Nesos, meaning island. The belief of the time was that the archipelago was linked to India through its history, culture, and trade connections, but also as a distinct region that deserved its own name. During this period, Indonesian indigenous intellectuals and leaders began to recognize the need for a shared identity among the diverse people of the archipelago. However, it was not until the early 20th century that the term gained widespread usage among Indonesians. The first native scholar to use the name was Ki Hajar Dewantara, when in 1913 he established a press bureau in the Netherlands. The term Indonesia was finally adopted by Indonesian nationalists as a means to imagine a sense of unity among diverse ethnic groups. Prior to the adoption of Indonesia, various youth groups had discussed the idea of separate Balinese, Javanese, Sumatran, and other nations. However, the term Indonesia brought about a new concept of a unified people that transcended the boundaries of individual ethnic groups. This idea of a united Indonesia became increasingly prominent in the following years, particularly in the context of the rising anti-colonial sentiment among the Indonesian educated elite. The term Indonesia thus played a significant role in the emergence of a national identity and consciousness among Indonesians during the early 20th century. The Indonesian national awakening was a period in Indonesia's history that began in the early 20th century. It was a time characterized by a movement to create a common identity among the various ethnic groups in the archipelago. One of the key figures in this movement was the nationalist leader Sukarno, who later became Indonesia's first president. There were several contributing factors to the emergence of a nationalist consciousness in Indonesia. These included the rise of indigenous print media, the process of urbanization, the influence of communism and Islam, increased access to education, and the popularity of mass entertainment such as film, Stambul theater, and keroncong music. All these enabled by the ethical policy of the Dutch. Additionally, the common experience of suffering under Dutch apartheid brought many indigenous people together and helped to foster a shared sense of identity and purpose. During the Dutch colonial period, indigenous voices were often silenced due to restrictions on freedom of speech and assembly. The Dutch government also heavily monitored dissident organizations, further suppressing dissenting opinions. While there were some individuals who spoke out against colonialism, they were in the minority. Most people tried to avoid the Dutch as much as possible, and the indigenous aristocracy largely collaborated with the colonial power. The national awakening played a significant role in the development of Indonesian nationalism and the formation of a distinct Indonesian identity. Here are some of the ways in which it contributed to this. Raised awareness of a shared identity. The national awakening brought together people from various regions and ethnic groups in Indonesia, promoting the idea that they shared a common identity as Indonesians. Emphasis on unity. The national awakening emphasized the importance of unity among Indonesians in the face of colonialism and oppression. This emphasis on unity helped to strengthen the sense of Indonesian identity. Promotion of education. The national awakening emphasized the importance of education and the need for Indonesians to learn about their own history and culture. This helped to create a sense of pride in Indonesian heritage and contributed to the development of a national identity. Despite its emphasis on education, the ethical policy of the Dutch did not provide widespread educational opportunities for the indigenous Indonesian population. However, the Dutch education system was made available to the children of the indigenous Indonesian elite with the intention of creating a pool of clerical labor for the growing colonial bureaucracy. This Western education also introduced political concepts such as freedom and democracy to the elite. During the 20s and the 30s, this small group of educated elites began to express their opposition to colonialism, and a growing sense of nationalism emerged. Promotion of Indonesian language. The promotion of the Indonesian language played a significant role in the national awakening, a period of Indonesian nationalism that took place in the early 20th century. During the Dutch colonial period, the Dutch had introduced their language as the official language of administration and education. However, due to the diverse linguistic and cultural backgrounds of the archipelago's people, a lingua franca known as Melayu Pasar or Market Malay had developed and was widely used in trade, commerce, and daily interactions. The National Awakening sought to promote the use of the Indonesian language, which was a standardized version of Melayu Pasar, as a means of unifying the country and forging a sense of national identity. This move was driven by the recognition that a common language was essential for communication, education, and political mobilization. The language was also seen as a tool for breaking down the linguistic barriers that had kept different ethnic groups isolated from each other. Through the use of Indonesian, the National Awakening leaders hoped to create a new sense of identity that transcended regional and ethnic differences. They believed that by adopting a common language, Indonesians could create a shared culture and heritage that would enable them to work together towards a common goal of independence and national sovereignty. The promotion of the Indonesian language was not without challenges, as there were significant differences between the various regional dialects that made up the language. However, through standardization and the development of a national curriculum, the language was gradually accepted as the official language of Indonesia after independence in 1945. Today, the Indonesian language remains a vital symbol of national unity and identity, used by over 270 million people in Indonesia and around the world. The country continues to promote the language through education, media, and cultural programs, recognizing its role in fostering national unity and solidarity. Overall, the National Awakening played a crucial role in the development of Indonesian nationalism and the formation of a distinct Indonesian identity. It helped to create a sense of unity among diverse groups of people and promoted the idea that they shared a common history, culture, and identity. The early 20th century saw the emergence of Indonesia's first political parties. The establishment of Budi Utomo in 1908 marked the beginning of organized modern political activity in Indonesia. It was founded by a group of Javanese medical students studying in Batavia. The membership was an upper-class elite of natives, government officials, and intellectuals, confined very largely to Java and the Javanese. The furtherance of popular education became their main activity. The group aimed to promote Javanese culture and language and to cultivate a sense of national identity among the Indonesian people. In 1912, the Indische Partij, Indies Party, was established by a group of Dutch-educated intellectuals, including Cipto Mangunkusumo and Ernest Douwes Dekker. The party was initially formed to promote the interests of the indigenous people within the colonial system, rather than to seek independence. However, over time, the party's position shifted towards advocating for full independence from Dutch colonial rule. The Indische Partij was influential in laying the groundwork for the later nationalist movement and served as a precursor to the more explicitly nationalist political organizations that emerged in the following decades. That same year, Sarekat Islam was established and quickly became one of the largest and most influential political organizations in Indonesia. It aimed to promote the interests of indigenous Indonesians and to resist Dutch colonialism through economic and cultural means. The organization was inspired by Islamic and Javanese mysticism and used Islam as a banner for opposition to Dutch rule. While initially focused on economic issues, Sarekat Islam evolved into a political movement with anti-colonial aspirations. The Communist Party of Indonesia was established in 1920 and was heavily influenced by European leftist political ideologies such as Marxism and Leninism. They believed that the only way for Indonesia to achieve independence and overcome colonial oppression was through a socialist revolution. In 1926, PKI attempted to launch a large-scale insurrection across Java, which involved the seizure of several key towns and ports. However, the Dutch colonial government quickly responded by launching a brutal crackdown on the communists, arresting and exiling thousands of them. This effectively quelled the PKI's activities for the remainder of the Dutch occupation. Despite its ultimate failure, the PKI's attempt at revolution marked a significant moment in the struggle for Indonesian independence and demonstrated the growing dissatisfaction with Dutch colonial rule. Aside from the political, Muhammadiyah was established in 1912 by Kiai Haji Ahmad Dahlan in Yogyakarta. Muhammadiyah was aimed at promoting Islamic values and education among the Indonesian Muslim community. It provided an alternative to the traditionalist Islamic organizations and was based on modernist Islamic teachings. Muhammadiyah established a network of mosques, schools, and hospitals throughout the country, which played a significant role in the development of Islamic education in Indonesia. On the other hand, Dwi Jo Sawoyo and some associates formed the Peasants Insurance Cooperative, or in Indonesian, Asuransi Jiwa Bersama Bumi Putra, in Magelang, Central Java in 1908. The cooperative aimed to provide insurance coverage for farmers and peasants who were often vulnerable to economic fluctuations and natural disasters. This initiative was part of a broader movement for economic self-sufficiency and empowerment among the Indonesian people, which was a key aspect of the national awakening. The cooperative model proved successful, and it was eventually replicated in other parts of the country, contributing to the growth of the cooperative movement in Indonesia. On 20th July 1913, Suwardi Suryaningrat, who had connections with the Bumi Putra Committee, wrote a thought-provoking article entitled Als ik eens Nederlander was, What If I Were a Dutchman? In response to the Dutch colonial government's plans to celebrate 100 years of Dutch independence. The article was a bold protest against the Dutch government's policies and their treatment of the Indonesian people. It called for a re-evaluation of the relationship between the Dutch and the indigenous Indonesians, and highlighted the injustices and oppression that the latter had been subjected to. The article gained widespread attention and admiration among Indonesians, particularly those who shared Suwardi's views. As a result of this article, Suwardi Suryaningrat and Dr. Cipto Mangunkusumo were tried and sentenced to exile in the Banda Islands. However, they were given the alternative choice of transportation to the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, Suwardi pursued studies in the field of education, while Dr. Cipto fell ill and returned home to Indonesia. The article written by Suwardi Suryaningrat marked an important moment in the Indonesian nationalist movement, inspiring many others to raise their voices and join the struggle against Dutch colonialism. The establishment of the Volksraad, a proto-parliament, marked a significant milestone in Indonesia's struggle for self-rule. However, it should be noted that the Volksraad had limited powers and was largely advisory in nature, and that the Dutch authorities retained ultimate control over colonial policy. It first convened in 1918, 2 years after its formation. The Volksraad initially consisted of 39 members, 15 of whom were native Indonesians. This marked the first time that Indonesians had a voice in their own governance. In 1918, the Dutch government promised to grant self-rule to Indonesians at some point in the future. This promise was not followed up on in subsequent years, leaving many Indonesians feeling disillusioned and frustrated. Despite the lack of progress, the establishment of the Volksraad gave Indonesians a platform to advocate for their rights and to push for greater autonomy. In 1927, Sukarno, one of the most influential and charismatic leaders of the National Awakening movement, founded the Indonesian National Party in Bandung. This was a significant milestone in the nationalist movement, as the PNI was the first secular party established with the primary aim of achieving independence for Indonesia. Unlike previous organizations, which were often based on ethnicity or religion, the PNI was open to all Indonesians, regardless of their background or beliefs. Under Sukarno's leadership, the PNI quickly gained support across the country and became a leading force in the struggle for independence. Its founding marked the emergence of a new phase in the national awakening, in which secular and nationalistic values took precedence over traditional religious and cultural identities. On the 28th October 1928, the All-Indonesian Youth Congress made a significant declaration by proclaiming the Youth Pledge, in Indonesian Sumpah Pemuda. This momentous event established the nationalist goals that sought to create a unified Indonesia with a shared identity. The Youth Pledge aimed to unite the people of the archipelago by promoting the ideas of one country, Indonesia, one people, Indonesians, and one language, Indonesian. This pledge was a clear statement of the nationalist movement's aspirations to unite the diverse communities of the Indonesian archipelago and build a shared identity based on common language and culture. The Youth Pledge has become a symbol of Indonesian unity and is commemorated annually as National Youth Pledge Day, Hari Sumpah Pemuda. Under Dutch colonial rule, political freedoms were severely limited for the native Indonesian population. While the Dutch pursued a policy of civilizing and modernizing the peoples of the Indies, they also strictly regulated and censored native publications and organizations. Despite some tolerance for these activities, the Dutch authorities were quick to crack down on any signs of overt nationalism or calls for independence. One example of this repression was the arrest of Sukarno, founder of the Indonesian National Party, by the Dutch in 1929. The PNI was the first secular political party in Indonesia to advocate for independence, and its activities were quickly suppressed by the Dutch colonial government. Many other nationalist organizations and political leaders were also jailed or harassed during this time. Despite these measures, nationalist sentiment continued to grow throughout the 1930s, fueled by events such as the Youth Pledge of 1928, which established the goal of an independent Indonesia. However, the Dutch were ultimately successful in thwarting widespread agitation and maintaining their grip on power. The onset of World War II brought uncertainty to the political future of the Dutch East Indies. As the Dutch were occupied by Germany in May 1940, their ability to maintain their rule over the archipelago became precarious. Despite this, the Dutch colonial government in exile was determined to uphold its sovereignty over the region. However, their position was further weakened when Imperial Japan invaded the Dutch East Indies in early 1942. The Japanese army quickly overpowered the Dutch forces in a matter of weeks, effectively ending 300 years of Dutch colonial presence in Indonesia. Under the subsequent 3-year occupation, the Japanese implemented drastic changes that made the Indonesian Revolution possible, which would have been unthinkable just a few years earlier. The profound impact of the Japanese occupation on Indonesian society and politics would play a crucial role in shaping the nation's struggle for independence. After the Japanese surrendered to the Allies in 1945, the Dutch sought to resume colonial control over the Indies. In these aims, the Dutch obtained the military backing of the British, who fought numerous battles on Java to restore Dutch rule. The Indonesian nationalists, despite heavy losses, were not to be deterred. By 1945, an idea of Indonesia was seemingly irresistible. The challenges faced by the diverse peoples of the archipelago in coming together to form a united nation were numerous and complex. Here are some of the main challenges and how they were overcome. Ethnic and cultural diversity. The archipelago was home to hundreds of different ethnic groups, each with their own languages, traditions, and customs. This diversity made it difficult to develop a sense of national unity. However, the National Awakening movement helped to promote the idea of a shared Indonesian identity based on a common history, language, and culture. Colonialism. Indonesia was colonized by the Dutch for over 300 years, which resulted in the suppression of local cultures and the imposition of Dutch language and customs. However, the National Awakening movement, along with other political movements, challenged the colonial authorities and demanded greater autonomy and self-determination for the Indonesian people. Geographical barriers. The archipelago consists of thousands of islands which made communication and transportation difficult. This hindered the development of a sense of a national identity, but the National Awakening movement worked to overcome these barriers by promoting the use of the national language, Bahasa Indonesia, and by establishing a network of schools and universities. Economic inequality. The archipelago was marked by significant economic disparities between different regions and social classes. The National Awakening movement sought to address this by promoting economic development and social justice and by advocating for the rights of workers and peasants. Overall, the National Awakening played a crucial role in promoting a sense of Indonesian nationalism and in laying the groundwork for the country's independence movement. While there were many challenges to overcome, the movement was ultimately successful in uniting the diverse peoples of the archipelago under a shared vision of a united, independent Indonesia. For me, this period is one of the most important in Indonesian history because of its impact towards the creation of a nationhood that is not based on one ethnicity. Indonesia is not an ethno-nation nor an ethno-state. It is truly multicultural since its inception. The largest ethnic group in the country is the Javanese, but the Javanese language is not the lingua franca, but rather it is the Malay language that is spoken by a minority ethnic group that's chosen as the lingua franca. And although Islam is the largest or majority religion, it is not chosen as the state religion when the Indonesian state was proclaimed. This can only come from a deep understanding of the complex history of Indonesia, where the nation was formed out of the union of so many different people that strives for a better life out of colonialism with independence. Sukarno believed that the people of Indonesia needed to come together to create a unified nation. He saw the diverse cultures and traditions of the archipelago as strengths that could be used to create a shared identity. This idea became known as Wawasan Nusantara, which translates to Archipelagic Outlook. Wawasan Nusantara emphasizes the idea of unity in diversity among the various peoples and cultures of the Indonesian archipelago. This concept has played a crucial role in shaping Indonesia's national identity and has helped to create a strong sense of patriotism among the people. The philosophy of Wawasan Nusantara seeks to unite the various peoples of Indonesia under a shared national identity while still celebrating and preserving their unique cultural traditions. It recognizes that Indonesia's diversity can be a source of strength and richness rather than a barrier to unity. The philosophy emphasizes that each culture and tradition has its own unique value and contribution to the wider Indonesian identity, and that the archipelago's diversity should be embraced and celebrated. The idea of Wawasan Nusantara has played a crucial role in shaping Indonesia's national identity and has helped to create a strong sense of patriotism among the people. It also helped to promote unity and tolerance among the various ethnic and religious groups in Indonesia. This philosophy is reflected in Indonesia's national motto, Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, which translates to unity in diversity. One of the key aspects of Wawasan Nusantara is the recognition of the importance of the ocean that surrounds Indonesia. As a maritime nation, Indonesia has a long history of trade and cultural exchange with other countries in the region. Wawasan Nusantara emphasizes the need to protect Indonesia's maritime resources and to promote cooperation and friendship among the countries of the region. Overall, Wawasan Nusantara represents a unique approach to nationalism that recognizes and celebrates the country's diversity while also promoting a sense of unity and common identity among its people. The concept of Wawasan Nusantara has evolved over time, reflecting Indonesia's changing society and politics. Initially, the concept was primarily focused on preserving Indonesia's cultural and natural diversity and promoting unity among its people. However, in recent years, it has also been used to promote economic development and regional cooperation. One way that the concept of Wawasan Nusantara is reflected in modern-day Indonesia is through the government's efforts to promote regional autonomy and development. Under Indonesia's decentralized system of governance, local governments are given significant autonomy and resources to promote economic growth and development in their respective regions. This approach reflects the idea that Indonesia's diverse regions have unique needs and opportunities that can be best addressed through local decision-making. Additionally, the concept of Wawasan Nusantara is reflected in Indonesia's approach to foreign policy, which emphasizes cooperation and collaboration with neighboring countries in Southeast Asia. This approach reflects the belief that Indonesia's security and prosperity are linked to the stability and well-being of its neighbors. Wawasan Nusantara continues to play an important role in shaping Indonesia's modern-day society and politics, reflecting the country's unique cultural and geographic diversity and its commitment to promoting unity, cooperation, and development. And that's a brief overview of the origins of the term Indonesia, the Indonesian national awakening, and the concept of Wawasan Nusantara. Join us next time for another episode of Nusantara Explained, where we'll be diving into the fascinating history and culture of Indonesia. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe to our Patreon for exclusive content and support the show. As I'm just starting out, I still need a lot of improving to do, so your support will mean a lot to me and will help me upgrade the quality and quantity of content that I could put out there for you guys. I would love to hear from you listeners, so please do interact with me on Patreon or in our social media accounts. So, see you next time.